In this video, I will talk about Java exception, how to handle exception in core Java and Spring Boot. So let's discuss. First one is, what is exception? So exception is like unwanted and unexpected event in program or in application. So basically anything which is not behave as expected by the user, so it gives some exception. And second one is like what is error? So error, you say that if a user wants some operation, or if a user executes some operation but the output is not come as the user expected. So basically error is an illegal operation performed by the user. And the type of the errors are like runtime, compile time, and the logical errors. Third one is, we discuss the flow or the hierarchy of Java exception. So first, any exception which extend the throwable class. So throwable class is the super class of all the exceptions. Throwable have two different types like exception and errors, which we discussed earlier. And after if you go, the type of exceptions are like runtime exception and checked exception. And runtime exception is also classified as unchecked exception because it is checked on the runtime, not in case of compile time. So unchecked example of unchecked exceptions are illegal argument exception, arithmetic number format exception. These are the exceptions, and if you want to go through all these exceptions, then you can Google it or check their definition. And in case of checked exceptions, like when you write the program, at that time it gives some error or warning, so user have to handle before the execution of or running the program. So type of checked exceptions are SQL exception, IO exception, parse exception, interrupted exception, and user exceptions. You can check and check these type of exception and see the definition of all and how they occurs. But in this video I only shows the type of runtime exception and checked exception. And in case of errors are like unchecked exception. So and the type are, these are the virtual, linkage error, assertion error, service configuration error. So now we talk about the type of exceptions. We already discussed that there are two type of exception, checked and unchecked. Checked exceptions, you can see the definition or point, check all the points of the checked exceptions. So basically these are the exceptions which are checked during compilation, not runtime. And these exceptions may be handled, or we try to handle by use of try catch block, or we can also handle with the use of throws and throw keyword. We discuss all these scenarios after this presentation. And what the package of the exceptions are, they come from where? Java lang exception. It's not part of this runtime exception. Checked exception is basically, it's a part of exception class, not a runtime exception. And example we already sees, and here we also check that the type of checked exception are file not found, IO, SQL, class not found exceptions. Another one is unchecked exceptions. So basically checked are the compile time, so these are the runtime exceptions. If we not handle the exceptions prior to the run execution of program, then it gives some errors or throw error. And the examples are these one. How exception create, if you want to see the code that how the exception actually create and how we can handle. So you can check here. First I make a class, or I take a class, so exception, this is a class name, and inside the main method I call a class, but actually that class is I define null, and if I want to print some method inside that class, then it gives some errors or exceptions. Like here, this one is the dog class. This one is the dog class, but here I only give the variable name, but I want to print that variable, but initially I initialize that dog class as a null, so due to this it gives some error. So now the question is that how we can handle this situation or this scenario. We can easily handle by simply we call this all code inside the try catch block. So if any exceptions occurs, then these exceptions can be handled in catch block, and if you want to print some like notification or some information to the user, so that way we can simply sys out the information. So yeah, this is the way that you can handle exceptions. And next topic is like how the actually exception is propagate. Like if we have a different what we say, like we have the controllers, then the repository services, and then after the database connections. So how if the exceptions occur in the database label, then how it propagate to the controller or to the user that user want to if you want to show the some another information to the user, not the actual exception which is occurred in the database level. So that way how exception is actually propagate from lower to higher or higher to lower, we can see here. So yeah, you can check the definition, like if the exception occurs in database, then it propagate where first it's service, then repository, then controller, and then after the user. And exception chaining, we can simply handle each exception at a different level. Like if the exceptions occur in database level, then first we can handle those exceptions in that then database level, and then if any exceptions occur while the execution of the service level, then we can handle there. And if any exceptions occur in controller or coming from the database, then repository, then the controller, then we can simply grab there in controller and then reflect to the user. And we also use some logging technique we can discuss, but yeah, you can check there the definition that how exception propagate. Here the example where you can see the code that this is a class, inside that class we have a main method, and inside main we can simply use a try catch block. So if any exceptions occurred in try, then simply it handled in catch block, and after that inside same class we have a method perform operations. This method is like a method which where we write the logic of the programs. So yeah, this is the root cause where the exceptions may be occurred, while if we don't write the exact or the exact logic. So yes, and this is the custom exceptions which I want to show the users. So for that I make a different class which is extend the exception class, and here is the constructor of that class, exception class. Now here we visualize the code of exception handling. So for that, first I do what? I write a comment for the class. So for that I make a static inner class. This is the inner class of parent one. The class name is custom exception, and this exception class extend the main exceptions. So extend the exception class, and after that I make a constructor for that and pass the argument. Like first one is the message, which is the type of string, and the second one is the exception which throws. So this one is the static class which is extend the exception, and after that I write main method which is responsible for calling the methods. So for that, this one is the main method, and here I make a object for what? My main class, exception handling. So exception handling example, this is the object name and new exception handling, and after that from variable name I call the method A, and this is the first method which interact to the user. So if any exceptions occurs, then all the information goes to the user by this method. So this method is like a mediator for user. So inside method A I write the try catch block, and inside try I call the method B, and first I write all the methods. Now I write the method B. This method is also return nothing, so it's type of void, and write the try catch block, and inside method B I call the method C, and now make a method C which is also nothing return, so it's type of void, and try catch block, and this method is main responsible for the exception occurrence. So here here you write the logic, and in your logic if any exception occurs, then it catch in the catch block. So if I simply calculate the operations like something divided by 0, so yeah, 10 divided by 0, so this if any number is divided by 0, then simply it's throw some exception, right? So for that I simply throw new my custom class, which is the custom exception class. Here I write the message like division by 0 in method C. So I can simply visualize that where is the actual root cause of the exception. So this is the root cause, method C, and null I pass the exceptions which is occurred in, and in exception catch block I simply write the which type of exception throws, arithmetic. So now this catch block shows some warning that error something, like throws some custom exception by the method signature level. So I throws the custom exception, and after that in method B this exception is catch, which is thrown by the method C. Similarly in catch block I write the custom exception, and it also throws in signature level, method signature level, and in method A I want to for the developers I want to log errors. So in meantime if I debug the code, then I will find the actual root cause and in which methods from the exceptions are occurred or thrown. So for that I make a log error and respond to client method is I want to visualize the any message to the user. For that I simply write a respond to client method. So this one is the log error. This method is only for the developers, like for logging something. So for that I make a method log error, and this is also nothing to return, so the type is void. I also write the comment here. This is only for the debugging purpose. And here in println I simply pass the message. Now for the user I make another method which is also return nothing, simply it's a print. So I write the return type as void, and in argument I pass the message. So message type is string message, and inside the method I simply sys out the information. And here I also write the comment that this method is only for the information sent to the user. And in each now in method A I also want to throw some custom exception, and if I run, then you can check both information, respond to the client and log error. Now move to next slide. This is related to the question and answer. If the interviewer asks some question related to the exception, that how you can handle exception in your existing project, then there is a different way that you can handle, and all the types are described in this slide. So for that first we define the type of exceptions. All the type we can define, like checked, unchecked. So first one is checked exception. So first checked exception is basically handled by the use of try catch block. These are the compile time exceptions, and we can also handle with the use of throw and throws. And this is the part of exceptions class, not a part of runtime exception class. I already discussed prior slide. So this is the structures where you can visualize that how if we working with the file input output scenarios, then we can use that way. Second one is unchecked. These are the runtime exceptions and class of runtime exceptions, and basically these are happens due to some, but if we write some logic mistakes and it don't handle the API in a proper way, so by that way it also gives some exceptions. So for that one we can use here, if it like we are working with some math operation, so that time it gives the arithmetic exception if any exception occurs. For that purpose we can handle that way. For global exception, if you are working with the thread, so that scenarios you can simply make a global exception handle class. These are the codes where you can visualize. And now I talk about that if you're working with the Spring Boot project, so in Spring Boot how you can handle exceptions. We use some logging technique, and we also check the code that how we use logging technique and global exceptional handler class. So yeah, basically in Spring Boot we make application related to web services and web application, and after that we also familiar with the microservices. So for microservices we use the different annotation. For web service and microservices we use a same annotation, and if you're working with the web application where the end output are the HTML, CSS, JavaScript, not as a RESTful API. So for that way we use the different annotation, and main annotation used by the exception handling in Spring Boot are like control advice and exception handler. Yeah, I already defined that we are working with the microservices and the web services. For that we use this annotation @rest controller advice. Otherwise we go to with this annotation @controller advice. And for if you want to print some information that if so for that we can use the logger. Basically logger helps the proper exception handling or the proper flow of the program for the user. So this is related to the developers. If developer want to show some if he unable to find the exact place where the exceptions or any improper flow of execution occurs, so that way we can simply use logging technique in each level of controller services repository and anywhere where you want to use. We can use the inbuilt logging technique, or we can also use slf4j.logger. For that we can simply add the dependency in pom.xml. I will show you exceptions which is handled in the web application, and after that same project will convert for the RESTful API. So for that first I need a Spring Boot starter web, and here I use Maven. So I make a project with the help of Maven. Java version is 17, and name you can write your project name. This is the project name which is related to the web application exception, and description you can describe. And for the package I use dev tool, because if I save then it automatically reload or start the server. For that I use these types, and the MySQL drivers, JPA, Thymeleaf I use because I'm making a web application. Then next basically a web application is where the end users are the actual user, so they see the HTML or CSS code. This is the application.properties file where you define the MySQL descriptions like for the connection to the database and the server port. And first I make a controller basically where the request or response right, then exceptions. This is the main class or main class for this tutorial. For web application I use the @controller, and this is the request mapping. So web application I use the @controller, and for mapping I use request mapping, @request mapping. And for after means if the request is coming or response, then where it goes to the service. So for that I use another user service, and I use annotation @auto_while, which is used for the dependencies injection. And another one is the service. This one is the service, so I annotate with the @service annotation. And in service first method is like find user, by ID. So for that I pass user ID in as an argument, and if any exception occurs then it simply throws user exception. This user exception is the is our custom exception. Second one is find all user, so it gives the list of users, so I use list as a return type, and it also throws some exception. Now I make entity for that, for what user table. So for entity there is an annotation used @entity. This come from the Java Jakarta persistence entity. First, in user I simply write two field only. First one is the ID, and I want to give auto generated, means if user is created then first ID is 1, another one is 2, like that. So for that I use generation type auto, and the second one is the username. For name I use a string and write your constructor or getter setter. So for that I use the Eclipse inbuilt feature for generating getter and setter or like constructor. Second one is the exception. So for that I make another package. This package is exception, and inside I make a class user exception which extend the exception class. Now user exception, this is the constructor, pass the message as an argument. Now error is gone. Next one is this service. Service is only like it's interface. So for implement I use another class which implement this service, and the class name is user service implementation, which implement my previous service, user service. So in interface you can define your method name, and for logic you can write in this class. Basically it uses the design pattern. And user service implementation I call the repository, user repository. This repository is the mediator for database table. So for that I make another package, and this service implementation is also annotated with the @service, and this user repository extend the JPA which I used in pom.xml. So for JPA repository it pass the user and the ID, primary key of the table, and this repository is annotated with the @repository. Now next one is another class for the errors. Like if you want give message to the user as a string, so for that I make this class, and first one is the error, which the error occurs, so I want to display to the user. Second one is the message, and third one is and code. So after that I use constructor, I remove from here to here, and local date time, why this error coming. Now make another getter setter of all field, but there, oh yeah, actually I don't define the variable name. Now make a getter setter for all fields, make another class. This class is global exception class, so all the exceptions are written inside the global exception. I also make a constructor with the argument. Now global exception, there is an annotation used for the web application @controller advice, and for REST application you used another annotation. I will make another video, same project will convert it to the REST application, so there you can check what an annotation is used. First one is I make a method which is related to the handling user exception. So for that I make a method and annotation use exception handler, pass the user exception class. Inside method I make an object for error details which I want to pass. Like first one is the user error, and second one is the exception occurs, and third one is the time. in which time the exception occurs. And for for this one is like condition checked. If like uh, any string which is related to the user not found, so for that I simply return the another error page, and if nothing if the condition is not checked, then simply return the error. Second one is the global exception. Like if the user exception is not occurred, then for another exception I can create another method handle global exception. Similarly, I write all these things which already I write in user exception, handle user exception. So now pass the local date time now, and simply return error. Annotate this method with the exception handler and pass the exception class. This error is come because second argument, I forget the second argument. So here you can write any information which you want to send to the user or want to show. Now again come to controller, and this controller, first I make a method which return type is string. So for this one I simply get all the users from the table, and for argument I use the modal because I want to pass the information to the page, so for that. And for exception handling I use the try catch block, and inside the try I list all the users. So if the user is not found or anything mishappening occurs or exception occurs, then it goes to the catch block. And for validation I also checked if condition, like if user is empty, then for that I want some information, I want to show some information to the user, so for that I pass in modal and return the user page. And if user is coming from the database, then I simply pass all the users information to the user. Return type, so in catch block I also pass the some information. For that I use the error page if any mishappening occurs, so for that I pass I want to show some another page to the user. So for exception occurs, then in catch it return the error page. And for the static page or the template I use the HTML. So for that you can make file inside the src, so src main resource and inside template. This is the first user HTML, and I simply write simple HTML code where I want to show hi user, and another page is related to the error one. So make another error.html file, and inside that I want to show error, and for the link to the previous user. You can display the users details here, all users. And not deep dive in HTML part. The main focus for this videos is related to the only exceptions handling. If I run, you can check some exception occur. What is SQL exception? Because I not start my SQL server. Now my SQL workbench is running, and if I start my application, then you can check my port, my application is running on port 8080. This is the request mapping for exception test, and this one is the get mapping. Request mapping is used for the class level, and the get mapping is used for the method level. Now in browser you can check, this is the error. And the second one is, if I want user from the ID, you check the page, because in my table there is no data present in my table, so you check this page. If I open my table, where is my table? Yeah, this one, user database. So table name, this is user. Okay, now write another method which return the users by ID. If I want to check user with the ID, so for that I make a method and simply pass the variable, path variable I get from user ID from the URL. Now again I use the try catch block, call the user service method find user by ID, and pass the ID. Again check for null. If the user is not found, then I use the information in error table, error HTML page, that user not found. If you don't want to show the another page like error, then you can simply pass as in session, and in HTML page you can get the information from session and show to the user. So here I simply use a simpler way that how you can send the different information to the browser. So attribute, in modal attribute, if all things are well, nothing occurs in means none exception will occur, then simply pass the user's details. And for getting user ID, I make another get mapping. Here the users, and inside the braces I pass the user ID. And here I use @ variable, path variable, and these are coming. Okay, return statement in catch block. So catch block you can again pass the error details, error page. Means modal dot add attribute, this information is goes to the user, means this information, this is the string which is written inside the double quote is showed to the user. So if I pass, then yes, you can check the error page. And yes, you can check the, and if you click, then you check, because my user table is also empty. So now there is a different ways that this whole part is done for the user, like the end user. And if the developer wants some logging scenarios, like logging helps the developers that if any exception or error occurs, then from logging the developer can get the exact information that where the exceptions or error occurs. So for that, developer use logging technique, and inside each methods they log the information, like in controller services. So for that I use the another private static final logger. This logger is the inbuilt feature provided by the Spring Boot, and you can use another logging techniques like SL4J, but first you need to add in pom.xml. So private static final logger, new, I make the object. This is coming from the this is the logger that get logger, and inside the method I call the same class exception controller dot class get name and logger variable. From that you can simply write different places, like first if the user is empty, so for that I also want to the developers that if the user empty, then this information shows to the users, so to the developers only. So this is this type is, but logging type is like info, and is if all things are good, if not no exceptions are occurred, then I also want some logging. So for that I print this information, user retrieved successfully, from which method get user. And inside the catch block, this level type is like what, some serious condition. So for that you can use server, and second argument is the information. So developer can easily find the exact place that in which method this exception is occurred, and here you check the whole logging. So for that you can simply make another file log, and inside first make a folder, then make a class, make a file spring boot application.log. So after making this file, the Spring Boot automatically log all the information inside that file. So this is related to the logging. This is related to this logging is this logging I write in where, in exception controller. And similarly I also want to log for the this method check user by ID. Okay, so you can log different places, so the developer can easily find the root cause. So mainly this is log file, spring boot application.log file, log all the informations like where you find in console. So all information is printed in spring boot application.log file. And another file I also want some logging. So for that, user implementation, this is the class where the logic are written. So I also want logging here, because if any exceptions are occurred inside this class, so for that developer can easily get the information. So first method is find by user ID, find user by ID, and here I call the user repository and call the method find by ID. Find by ID come from the JPA repository, and here it also cover the null check. So if user is null, then simply log the information that user not found with id, and I write the method. So there is a best way to find the log, and if the user is fine, then simply run the user. And in catch block, simply again I log the information that log error related to which while retrieving the user. So log error while retrieving by user id, and method name is find user by id, and simply throw user exception. Throw new user exception, print the message name. Write the user exception in catch block. No, this one is like handle the exception. So now if all thing well, then simply return user, otherwise throw exception. Similar way in find all user, return user repository dot find all, and I want to typecast as list user because I wanted this information as in list form. And in catch block, throw user exception. In catch block, you can also write user exception in place of exception, but here I write the exception. But the best way is like you also pass the same exception type like user exception. Now all the logging are also handled. You can check all the information in this file. If I print, then you can check the logging. Yeah, user not found by user id. Now we will check the exception, how to handle exception in case of web services or microservices. So I convert existing project in RESTful API, but first I make another project and the same code will be converted for web services. So for that I make another project and name of project is web service exception. This is the descriptions, this is related to RESTful API. Then at next and for package I used Spring Data JPA, Spring Boot DevTool, Spring Web, MySQL Travel. Thymeleaf I will not use because here I make a RESTful services. Now I take all the simply I copy all the application properties to the newer one because I use same database, and after that I also copies, but first I run the project. Now it's working fine, and after that I copy the existing entity exception repository services, these one, copy and paste here src com.binary inside this package, paste. Now I check all the packages are available, and it's time to convert methods. So first return type is string. Now I use response entity, and inside response entity I send the error details. Inside if condition I also return the response entity with these errors, and inside the argument, first argument is error and the second one is status code. So for this status code is bad gateway, bad request. I can also simply use this. So if I remove the if condition, then it's also fine for me. So yeah, I can remove this if condition, and so this is the exception for the user. Now for the global exception, I also change, and in return I send these response entity, and the argument is error details, not error. So convert this error details, and I also want to log for the debugging purpose. So for the logging I will use the logger here, and logger is equal to logger dot get logger, and define the class here global exception dot class and dot get name. And this logging I will use inside the handle user exception. So for that I can use where I can use here after the error details. So before returning the response entity, I will log all these information. So in future, if there is any problem occur, then for debugging purpose it is easy for developer. So first information is the log level info, and the second argument I will pass what the exception is for the, this is the exception occurred in which user exception. You can also write the method name. So it's easy for the it's easy for find that from which methods this logging exception is called. And yeah, I think this one is complete. I also copy the controller because method is same, only the annotation are you change. So for controller annotation, now I will use different annotation which is used for the microservices or the web services. So for that I use the REST controller, and here I use the API because it's differentiate the normal URL and API. So prefix I will use API, and the method it's the return type is response entities because I want the response as in JSON. I use object because for if condition it return different thing, and if there no other exception will occur, then response type be different. So for that I use the object here. So if the user is empty, then I send the no user found, and the status code is HTTP status is not found. Now if the all things are good, so for that here I pass the details of user. So for this purpose I used here object, not define the exact, because if I also take, I can also take as user as a response entity if the return type will be same, but here the return type is different, so I use the object. And in catch block I simply here but I can used logging, then after throw, and this method is also throw some exception. Here I can define the Which exception? This exception is basically related to the user custom exception. And the second method, for same, I can also use the return type. In place of string, I use the response entity object, and inside the if condition, now I can copy from here and paste inside this if condition. So for error, I can simply pass the no user found with this ID. This is come inside the string because this is the string. And if no exception occurred, then in case I return the user. This user, single user. And in catch is also same, and you can define your own description. So simply here I print the message for which is come from the user exception. And if I run this project, then you can check here. In case of this is the URL which is not mapped, so it simply give the error. So first I use the API and then exception test. Yes, this exception is coming from this method. And if I pass the user ID, so for that you can check all these exceptions. So this is the handling of exception in case of web services as well as the REST API. Now go to the another slide. We can also handle exception by the use of throw and throws. So yeah, throws is basically used at the method signature level, and throw is used inside the method. You can check the code here. We can use try catch block. This is a simple try catch block. Like inside the try, we handle the scenarios of input and output, and then check the all scenarios. Like if exist, then print, otherwise it gives some information to the user, and if any exception occurs, then it handled here in catch block. Now we will check the code related to the try catch block, how we can handle in code. So this is the example where we simply read the data from the file. So first I write the method, but the method name is inside. This method is written inside the main method. So for that, I say first I write the public static void main. So this one is the main method, and I call method name here. The method name is read with simple file, because in this example I will show how you can read data from a simple file like txt. So method, I can write simply print the because I simply print the method name. It's a void type because it return nothing. And inside the try block, I call the object because it's I'm working with the file, so type will be object and the variable name is the directory, and make a object of file, so new, and inside I get the path of this one, and after that I call the path dot get and the directory, and after that simply call the file name. file.txt file. So directory give the whole absolute path where my the file txt file is reside or available. So a whole path I will concatenate with the file name and check. Now I check the file exist. So if the path is exist, then I want simply stream. First I read the all details line by line. So for that I will use the stream type of string and variable name is lines, and from the files I read the whole data line by line. So I pass the path, file path, and after that I loop through these line, and here I use the system.out.println. This is the method reference which is introduced in Java 8 : println. And in else condition, if the path not exist, then simply print. And for the exception, here I call the exceptions name. Simply I want to print. So yeah, you can check the output here, but the file does not exist. Here it gave the else part because I think my path is not correct. Yeah, you can check here that this is my path, helpers, and then concatenate the file txt. So if I print the path here, then what I print, okay, helper file.txt. So it concatenate the helpers object folder. So for categorize I use the / here. Now you can run. So yeah, this is the try catch block. Next slide is related to the try with resource. Basically if you're working with like file, socket and database, and if you want to close these resources automatically or explicitly, means you don't need to close explicitly, but you want to close itself. So for that way we use the try with resource. So how it different from the try catch block. In try catch block all the scenarios are written inside the try, but in try with resource it handled in the we can say as an argument. Like here I take the stream of strings, means I catch the file and read all the information from the file. For that way I simply call the connection inside the try as an argument, and after inside the try block I simply print the information, and if any exception occurs then it simply print here. So yeah, this is the scenarios where you familiar with the code as well as the exceptions. Here we check the example of try with resource, how we can use the try with resource. So for that, first I call a main method, and inside the main method I write read with simple file. This is the method name where I want to handle the scenarios related to the file. So for that I write public static return type p void, because it's return nothing, and for v, in place of v I write the method name. And yes, for try with resource, so try with resource as an argument used. So in try I pass the path of file where I want to read the data from files. So string lines, file lines, here the path, I get the path, and in previous example I get the path from the methods like system.getProperty and absolute path, but here I simply pass the whole data, and after that lines dot for each, if I read the data from the given path, then after that I simply loop through, and inside I call the method reference system.out : println, and in place of path I get the whole file path. So for that I simply use the system.getProperty user directory. User directory give the whole path of the existing current directory. If I run, then in console I can check my current directory path. So inside the string I pass my absolute path, and after I write the file name, which one is the file.txt. So now I can remove the next argument, and yeah, this code is finished. And here I write the file.txt file, and file you can write anything. So here I write hi, I am binary. This is my YouTube name, YouTube channel name. Now in console you can check. If I again run, now yeah, you can check the line here, and in catch block you can write anything. Here I want print struct trace. So this is the whole exceptions video described here, and for more exciting videos please help my channel, please subscribe and like and comment. Yeah, thank you.